On the battlefield, because of the latitude the president has given us, American firepower is only increasing. Iran's decreasing. We have more and more options, and they have less. The upcoming days will be decisive. Iran knows that, and there's almost nothing they can militarily do about it. Yes, they will still shoot some missiles, but we will shoot them down. Of note, the last 24 hours saw the lowest number of enemy missiles and drones fired by Iran. The latest intel is clear out of CENTCOM. Our strikes are damaging the morale of the Iranian military, leading to widespread desertions, key personnel shortages, and causing frustrations amongst senior leaders. But if Iran is wise, they will cut a deal. President Trump doesn't bluff, and he does not back down. You can ask Khamenei about that. The new Iranian regime should know that by now. This new regime, because regime change has occurred, should be wiser than the last. President Trump will make a deal he is willing, and the terms of the deal are known to them. If Iran is not willing, then the United States War Department will continue with even more intensity.
Well, there you have it, a very clear statement from U.S. Secretary of Defense or Secretary of War Pete Hegseth. First press appearance in 12 days. Lots to say about Iran. I'm joined by Leila Bazzi, MBN's Editor-in-Chief, and by Matt Kaminski, MBN's Editorial Chair. And there you have it. Reactions? Matt, what do you think?
I think it's clearly contradictory, obviously, in the statement. He does spell out what the options are for the U.S., and I think if you're Israel and the Gulf states that want the U.S. to be strong and to finish the job, they can find in what he's saying some comfort that the U.S. and that President Trump is not going to cut and run, some comfort. If you are looking at it from a U.S. domestic point of view, you find some discomfort. There are 7,000 troops there, and they may be put into use. And the last thing I would say is, I think his characterization of Iran as having gone through a regime change is at best...
Not accurate.
It's at best hopeful. Yes, a lot of
changed people, faces,
changed people, exactly.
Names, but they are still the same.
But it's the same system. It's a system that has proved itself in response to the U.S. attack more resilient than the U.S. expected and more unpredictable going forward. I do think there's an opening for talks, but there's clarity about the statement. There's no clarity about what's going to happen in the next 2 weeks.
Andres, I want to add something to that Iran and the Iranian regime, it's not being also resilient. They believe in al-Shahada, martyrs. So I don't think their morale is that down. Maybe the people is down, but for them as IRGC, they believe in being a martyr. They believe in the al-Shahada, and that's the sublime thing that you can reach. So this is what you're fighting against. And to Matt's point, there is this confusion within the Trump administration. There are people with, there are people against, and there are causes regarding the oil, the economy inside the country. So from Hegseth, we can say, yes, they are planning to pursue with the finishing what they have started. But do we see clarity of the end game, or what is the plan?
Well, and here's the thing, we have some pretty important dates coming up. Frankly, just for those who don't follow Iranian culture, one of the big days in the Iranian New Year, which we talked about before, is actually, it's an almost 2-week celebration. On the 13th day, Iranians go outside and basically throw out things that are representative of the old, and to start basically things that they want to get rid of. They go outside and symbolically get rid of those things. And that's coming up on April 2nd. That's a big thing. So,
2 days
it'll be interesting to see what happens in Iran, because in the past, there have been people who have taken advantage of that to express their discontent with the regime. But that's a lead into a few other dates that are coming up. One of them is that U.S. President Donald Trump gave a deadline of April 6th, and that's actually coming up in a few days' time.
True.
So what happens with the Strait of Hormuz? I know that he's given a few extensions, but that is a fixed date at the moment. And one more date. next week, we can talk about this probably next week, but next week will be the 40th day since the killing of the
Khamenei.
late supreme leader,
Yeah.
and
And
among a
that
number of other people.
and
And
the 40 days
historically, in
is,
Iran, people use that 40th
yes,
day. It's a
yes.
big symbolic
It's
thing.
part of the culture, yes.
Well, I think two things.
So what's going to happen? Matt, tell us about the 6th, though. I mean, it's interesting. What do you think of that deadline? Like, what might happen if that isn't met?
I mean, there's a lot of talk about the taco trade, right? The taco that Trump always chickens out. Will he bend here, or maybe will he not? And actually, people who are his supporters in the region don't want him to bend, and you're hearing a lot. There was a big delegation of people from the Emirates in town last week, and they came away with the impression that Trump, this is about Trump's legacy. He is committed to finishing this through. The markets are picking up on this, and that's why they're panicking that he is not going to bend, and this will not end sooner rather than later. And you have 7,000 troops in the region now as a Marine Expeditionary Force that was not there before, and Trump in the past has usually when you send equipment or troops to a place, he does tend to use them. So I think there's a lot of talk around Washington. You've heard some leaks the last couple of days of there are these couple islands at the entry to the Strait of Hormuz. Yes. Obviously, there's a whole debate about Karg Island on the other side of the Persian Gulf, but that's the where most of Iran's oil industry is. So I think people are bracing for this to get turn into more of a ground conflict, which again would really spook the markets and really spook U.S. domestic politics.
Yeah, and for me and my personal point of view, I see not only the Strait of Hormuz as an issue. I think what's coming, it's also al-Mandab Strait. Now the Houthis are already joined the war, but this remains to be seen. This is for a different conversation. We can talk about that. But
no, it's an important one. Yeah, no,
it's the economy between these two straits, how it's going to end up.
I think I think there's, again, they're confusing, they're contradictory messages, but they are clear messages coming out of Washington and from the region. The one thing we don't really know is what's happening inside Iran itself. And I think this is the great question mark. And I, reading Andres's newsletter very, very closely, there's an internet blackout, there's very little coming out. And we don't even know who he's negotiating with. Trump keeps invoking the head of the parliament in Tehran, but there's so little, and there's no journalists on the ground, obviously. So we don't really know how much damage has been done to Iranian infrastructure, mostly targeted the military stuff, but we don't know what the mood on the ground really is around this.
And I'll tell you what I keep coming back to, as the Iran editor at MBN, I focus on Iran, and what strikes me on a daily basis is actually how much of what we talk about isn't strictly speaking about Iran, right? Whether it's Israel and Lebanon, we'll be talking about that. Whether it's the Bab al-Mandab, the Gate of Tears, which is actually on the Red Sea, which isn't really near Iran. Hormuz, it's not really strictly speaking about Iran as well. I mean, obviously it's the chokehold that they can apply, but it's about other trade that's passing by, what happens to be Iran. Over and over and over again, the things that we talk about aren't even about Iran. And it is striking, as you said, Matt, that in the end, we don't even know what's going on inside Iran. And yet, we have so much else going on. And it does make you wonder kind of the cork and the genie in the bottle, like, and we'll be talking about this today as well, is it's not, we talk about an ending to the war. How would it end? Because even if the war with Iran ends, fine, whatever, there's some type of agreement.
That's the key question always.
It's not clear that the other things that have been unleashed are actually going to end.
How, when, and who decides how it ends, and this is usually the question, the famous David Petraeus question was, tell me how this ends. I think the question here is who will decide that it ends. And The Economist over the weekend had a cover story that really angered a lot of Republicans and a lot of people who support Israel and some of the Gulf states here. And the headline was "Advantage Iran," that Iran thinks that it has a stronger position than on February 27th. Yes. And that it thinks it's got, I'm not sure I entirely buy it, but again, I don't quite know what's going on inside. Two of you, advantage Iran, true or false?
They do have an advantage if I have to be watching what's going on. everything that's happened now, they've been on for 20 years preparing for that. They have nothing to lose. A person who has nothing to lose will go to the far end. So they do have an advantage. So their loss in their head, again, going to their thinking of being a shaheed or a martyr, they have nothing to lose. The people are losing, but the regime, they are proving in front of the others they are resilient. The proxies, oh, they are strong, they are standing against the biggest, strongest country in the world, and then Israel. This is how they think about it. They don't have the same set of mind of how we see things and how we perceive things and how the US, Europe, and the Gulf sees how things are gonna end up.
Oh, well, I have to say, this regime, as we probably know, loves the whole martyrdom concept. I mean, you look at the 8-year war between Iran and Iraq, and basically, I mean, sending people in these essentially suicide waves and recruiting 12-year-old kids, which I want to point out also, you'll see in the Iran newsletter this week, they have opened up recruitment opportunities for down to 12 years old to go and basically
So
prepare
sad.
to fight if there's a ground war. So as you pointed out, Leila, martyrdom is a really key element of the psyche here. And how do you fight that, right? If people are willing to go to such extremes, then how do you deal with that? I
Yeah,
think
but
that's a really
I would actually sort of
big
push back on
question.
this. I do think so. Do think again? We don't really know what's going on internally.
No.
We know a couple of things about Iran too. We know that 90% of people really despise this regime.
Of course.
It is one of the youngest populations in the Middle East. It is an incredibly cultured, rich history. The Islamic Republic is a blip in the history of the Persian world, and I think it really does depend on how the U.S. and its allies kind of figure out the energy problem. But then we know that regimes that are this unpopular and this illegitimate tend not to last when under pressure. It doesn't mean that it happens in week 5 of a conflict, but it also doesn't mean that this regime will be here 5 months from now.
My thinking is that the people will do another uprising, but not now. Because, think about it. Just put yourself in their place. Even if there's somebody who wants to go against the regime, but I'm being bombed. Can I act now if there's no unity within the opposition? I would think I will just play it low until I have a better opportunity when there is a space, maybe during the negotiation, I don't know. I'm just analyzing. If you put yourselves in their shoes, you cannot fight on 2 fronts. So there's going to be an uprising when, to your point, they don't like the regime, they are the youngest generation, and they will. They've done that before and they were oppressed. Who did it before when the regime was in its peak, they will do it when the regime is at its lowest.
So as we were saying, a lot of this has to do with things that are not strictly speaking Iran or Iran domestic. And as we talked about earlier, Lebanon, Israel, Lebanon, lots going on there. Leila, what do you think?
Well, there's a lot of things that I think about, but I want to share something that I watched this morning. I usually get some stuff about what's going on in Lebanon through Instagram. So I was scrolling.
You are Lebanese. You have some connections on the ground, to be clear.
Yes, I'm Lebanese, and my family are still there. And my brother is displaced as well, unfortunately. So in the morning, I just scan quickly through my reels and see what do I have. So there was something that stopped me. There's a woman who was saying, I'm so sorry, I'm not gonna give you my son as a martyr. It's not for the sake of anybody that my son is going to die. This has to stop. And this is from the community who used to embrace Hezbollah. They are one of, she's a Shia. She's one of the people who displayed. She was saying bluntly to the cameras that, like, people are documenting this. Excuse me, no. My son is not a project to be a shaheed or a martyr for the sake of anybody, and of course not for the sake of Khamenei. And this is where I want to speak about sovereignty. You know, Lebanon did, Hezbollah, not Lebanon, did Harb al-Isnad, which is supporting Gaza. And they said, oh, we want to support Gaza and all of that. And now, fast forward, what happened in after the death of Khamenei, oh, now it's no longer the Gaza support. Now it's no, we're supporting Khamenei. You're supporting whom? Is this or that, or they change their narrative? This is a way of not trying, they want to keep their weapons within the country. Unfortunately, since we had Ta'if, the one that happened in the Gulf, and when we had the Prime Minister, the deceased Rafiq al-Hariri back then, there was the government, the army, and the resistance existed. I don't know how they existed together, but they did exist, and their weapons was there. But now things has changed. Al-Salam government, they removed the word resistance from the policy of the government, and that's huge.
Yeah, but I think this has been also exposed, the weakness of the Salam government and the weakness of Lebanese sovereignty.
I would argue that.
But I would say, one, Hezbollah was allowed to attack Israel, giving Israel a cause to say, well, look at being attacked from the north. We're going to move. We're going to move up and take care of this problem because you're not taking care of it. You haven't disarmed Hezbollah. You let this happen. Second thing happened is the Lebanon has expelled or declared PNG, the Iranian ambassador in Beirut. Where is he?
And he's still there.
In Beirut. I mean, they will say, we cannot go in the embassy and throw him out, but it just exposes that it's still, unfortunately, all these years later, a very weak government. And until you break Hezbollah, and it's I guess Hezbollah's fighting with something too. They lost their entire leadership last year, but they are still, until proven otherwise, the most powerful military, if not political force in Lebanon.
I would argue that, yes, if you look at the map from outside, yes, the government between the President Joseph Aoun and Salam, it looks weak, and it looks that they are not doing what they should have done based on their agreement or the ceasefire with the Israeli that was governed by the US. But again, you have this political military party is embedded, and it's really embedded within the society and in the government. So it's complicated. It's not as easy as it is. But you should see the good point is that you never had the last 3 or 4 presidents since Ilyas Lehrawi. We didn't have any president or any prime minister saying that the decision of war and peace is for the government, not Hezbollah or not any other party. That's for the Lebanese inside Lebanon. That's huge. And inside Lebanon,
it's aspirational, Leila. It's not the reality yet.
I know, but for Lebanese, because you're listening to other voices who used to be scared of saying this, they are surfacing and saying the same thing. But this is where things becomes much more dangerous.
Well, they have the memory of the Civil War, and,
yes,
and this is what they're all trying
That's the
to
point.
avoid. Yeah.
That's the point.
Well, it's funny. Can I just jump in and say the word Iran didn't even come up in the last few minutes of this discussion.
But because
and that's
of them,
the interesting
Andres,
thing for
because of
me
them.
is that we're back to other unresolved Middle East conflicts for which Iran has been a catalyst for them to reemerge, but they have nothing to do with Iran. I mean, yes, of course, the Shia and Hezbollah and so on in Iran. But at the heart of it, there are some key issues in Lebanon and between Israel and Lebanon that have only kind of an ancillary influence on Iran or vice versa. And I just find that really striking. It makes me think about the Houthis as well, right? So the Houthis suddenly shot these 2 missiles on Saturday that were shot down, but they're really far. They're far from Iran. They're far from Israel. And the things that the Houthis talk about actually never have anything to do with the Houthis, right? They want an implementation of the Gaza agreement. Okay, Gaza's pretty far from where the Houthis are in Yemen.
It's an excuse. Gaza has always been used as an excuse by the Iranian just to have more power anywhere they go.
Exactly. It's so striking that it's almost like everybody has some other reason that they can hold over everybody else to then talk about what their particular agenda and issues
but I think
are.
the Houthis,
And it just keeps striking me. And, we can, even when this war is over, I have a strong suspicion that, as I said earlier, there can be an agreement, fine, yay, whatever is arrived at. and the Pandora's box of Israel and Lebanon, I'm not sure that that's going to have a lid put on it anytime soon.
Well, especially people in Lebanon do want to create a much bigger buffer zone, hold the south. I do think that there's a difference between what the Houthis have done and Hezbollah has done.
Yeah.
I think Hezbollah, this is a symptom of their weakness, and in a certain sense. I mean,
Yes.
certainly political weakness, and it's they are fighting for their future. They're fighting to be relevant. This has made them more unpopular, and it's interesting to hear that that's also being felt in the Shia community. The Houthis, I don't know if that's a kind of a symptom of perceptions of who's winning the war in the Persian Gulf, because we all thought that the Houthis are going to hold back because they're going to hold out for Saudi recognition of their control over northern Yemen. That's a very complicated relationship they're trying to manage, and they got involved in week, now approaching week 5.
Yes.
I think presumably because there's Iran's doing better than we thought. They are our patron. There's a bet to be made in doing this and potentially angering, not potentially, definitely angering Riyadh. So
How it's gonna end and what's gonna happen next. So we're having the dates, the 2nd, as you said, and the 6th of April as well. So
Yep.
these are
and the
coming
9th,
dates.
when we have the 40th anniversary, 40th day after the death of a lot of Iranian leaders, especially the supreme leader. So let me throw this out there. If you could sit down right now and just, have a dinner with a newsmaker who in this war we're talking about, who would it be? Who's your kind of sit down, you get to wave a magic wand and you get to kind of pick their brain and they're completely open with you. Who would it be for you both?
I mean, I think
Matt?
he's completely open in his various interviews with journalists who call his cell phone all the time, and he's I think the most transparent president we've ever had was Donald Trump. I think with Trump, who's able to believe and say very contradictory things almost in the span of a few minutes, I'd be very curious to see, because there's a perception that Trump, doesn't study Foreign Affairs magazine at night and is not sort of deeply enmeshed in his briefing books, but he has this instinctual, almost feral kind of approach to doing politics, to running wars, and that's why it's just so discombobulating for so many people. Never seen a war run this way, but it's worked for him in politics, and it worked for him in Venezuela. We'll see in Iran. I think sitting down with him would be very interesting for me to see, to understand. Again, this is an off-the-record conversation over a cheeseburger and a Diet Coke, right? He does have long-standing views on Iran. There's this clip going around from 1988 where he's talking about, we're going to go to war with Iran, we have to get control over their oil, and we might have to get control of Karg Island. This is like talking about Barbara Walters in 1988. Yes. That's almost 40 years ago. So there
Interesting.
Leila, something there.
Who's your sit-down hour newsmaker? Private dinner.
Witkoff, for sure, because he is not the ordinary politician. He's a deal maker, and really so interesting to see how things are going behind closed doors and how things are transformed. How does he deal with all this and manages all these changes, very quick changes at the same time? I would sit with Witkoff.
The one thing I would add to my Trump, I put him on truth serum, is that I would want to know, who does he really trust? Does he trust Steve Witkoff? What does he really think about Jared Kushner? And how much does he trust Jared Kushner? Who's he talking to most often about this? Is it Rubio? Where does Vance come in? Where is Susie Wiles? Because they each represent something different.
That's a full interview.
That is the truth serum Trump. Like who he's getting calls from, who he's talked to in the region. Obviously, Bibi, we know. Who else? Andres, who would you choose?
Well, you chose two very respectable people from the U.S. side. I would want to sit down with Mujtaba Khamenei and find out what is
Take his
going
pulse.
on. So he's
See if he's
ostensibly been the
alive.
supreme leader of Iran following his father's killing
Is he in a coma?
for 22 days now. Where is he? No picture, no voice, written statements read out by somebody else, and he's allegedly the supreme leader of Iran. So I would, I'm not even sure I'd want to spend an hour sitting down. I would just want to see, like, hello, like, where are you? What's going on? And then go have dinner with somebody else. I'm not sure he'd be a fun dinner partner anyway.
But he's a very
But,
he's a very under-impressive or unimpressive figure, and that's why his father didn't want him to be considered to be a replacement. And I guess that would be telling in itself, because then he could be a puppet, or seems to be, and now he's playing a virtual puppet.
Exactly. And then, of course, to come full circle, who's making the decisions? As you pointed out, Matt, we don't know. And it's so, we know what's going on in all of these other countries. We have some idea what the Houthis are up to. We have certainly an idea what the Gulf states are doing, so the US, Lebanon, and Israel. And of course, the country that is in theory at the center of all this continues to be a big cipher with a shut down internet, a supreme leader who may or may not actually exist at this point or have his full faculties, somewhat opaque leadership system. It continues to be a cipher and a mystery, and of course that's what keeps us certainly engaged as journalists to try to figure out what's going on.
Andres, I think it's so interesting that you were saying about how a lot of the what's playing out in the region doesn't have anything directly to do with Iran. It is a proximate cause. But this is, in my view, this may be the first global or digital global conflict, not even digital because it's real, the effects of it, global conflict of this century. Even the Iraq War, which divided the U.S. and America and sort of made Putin throw a little bit of a fit in Russia, didn't have that much of an impact on oil prices and wasn't really an issue in Asia. It kind of mobilized anti-Americanism.
Yes.
But this one is so, look, the impact on the European economy probably greater than on the American economy and on the Asian economy. It could lead to a food crisis. It could lead to an emerging market crisis, what's happening in Bangladesh and the Philippines. You are seeing Volodymyr Zelensky in the Gulf now, striking deals with countries there to show that he's a reliable ally. You see the Russians providing intelligence to the Iranians that allegedly helped them strike very target American radar planes in Saudi Arabia. So you see China sitting more quietly on the side. They need the oil. They wouldn't mind if the U.S. was bogged down.
They do have a little bit of reserve for a certain period of time, not that long.
They do.
They're
also watching their main rival potentially have, we thought, like Venezuela, it would be a big win. Now it's looking less clear how this is, because we don't know how it's going to turn out. So it really is I would say, the first global conflict of this century. And I would not have expected it coming out of the Middle East, because it seemed like we had, that it was, there were outside powers involved, but the conflict seemed so local, Israel versus Iran. And that was maybe a lack of imagination, at least on my part, to imagine how this, to sort of see how this could go everywhere.
I would disagree about coming from the Middle East. Knowing what's going on, it's always been the weakest location, and there's always crisis in there. It was bound to happen out of the Middle East.
I was thinking about this today. We have two choke points, right? We have the Strait of Hormuz, and then we have the Red Sea and the Suez Canal. And ships, and this is, talk about unintended consequences, ships are now going around the Cape of Good Hope. They're adding on like $1 million worth of fuel costs to their voyages, cargo, because they have to go all the way around the Horn of Africa. I mean, it is fascinating, not the Horn of Africa, but like Southern Africa. The knock-on effects of this thing are staggering. We think about, obviously, inflation and fuel prices and so on. And one of the things to bear in mind is that I think it's easy to forget that, Iran does have an important oil economy, but it actually doesn't supply a very big percentage of the world's oil. It's probably in 7th or 8th place.
Yeah, but
the
region
key
does,
is its
right?
location and those choke points.
Yeah.
And this is what's so interesting as well, is that, it's about Iran, but it's not about Iran. It's about choke points. It's about ships, inflation, war in Ukraine, and all sorts of, we can spend the rest of our lives probably, and the whole planet will, dealing with the ramifications of what's going on here. China, up or down after this. Russia, up or down. Oil prices are up. Good for Russia.
I still don't think.
It's amazing what this is going to result in.
I mean, what I mean by sort of global conflict, it has global implications to a degree that were unimaginable, and that the markets haven't even, I think, fully grappled with. But I don't think that the Middle East will be the spark for a global armed conflict in the way that Ukraine could definitely be if Russia goes after NATO members, or that Taiwan will be. But it will have implications there too on U.S. deterrence in Asia, and also America's and therefore Europeans' ability to support Ukraine against Russia, or, as we're seeing with Zelensky, his ability to kind of use what's going on in the Gulf to strengthen his hand. Famously, he has no cards, but he seems to be getting some cards now.
Yeah.
So, our dinner plans are set. Matt, you're going to go have dinner with U.S. President Donald Trump. Leila, you're going to go have dinner with Steve Witkoff. I'm going to go on a hunt for Mujtaba Khamenei and wish me luck in actually tracking him down. And we'll probably have lots to talk about at our respective dinners, and maybe mull over what we talked about in today's podcast. Thank you both. Looking forward to next week.
See you guys. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.